Welcome to those of you who are joining us. Welcome to the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a resource. This is a City Efficiency Leadership Council event, and it's sponsored by the State Energy Conservation Office. I'm Shaun Auckland, I'm the local government program manager here at SPEER. And today we'll have several speakers, Eddy Trevino with the State Energy Conservation Office, and Marina Badoian from the Houston Advanced Research Center. Today we're going to be presenting on the local government survey, the results of the interest and resource needs, a statewide survey that we had. Before I go any further, I want to give again thanks. This presentation and also the work of the survey was in partnership with CELC and HARC. And with that, Eddy, do you want to say a few words before we move forward?
Sure. Thanks, Shaun. We're happy to have the opportunity to partner on this survey and to see the results. As you know, it's your input and the input of all the local governments and everybody else that participates in the survey that helps us direct our use of funds going forward. So what you say is getting heard, and we are listening, and we are implementing, and where we can, your information into our program and to our programmatic areas. So please continue to participate on these surveys, and please voice your opinions on where you think help is needed the most. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you, Eddy. We appreciate you being here and taking time. So today, a quick overview. I'll be going over the City Efficiency Leadership Council and a few resources, upcoming events, and then we'll do some housekeeping and go straight into the statewide survey results presentation. And then we'll also have discussion and some questions. A little bit about SPEER, which is South Central Partnership for Energy as a resource. We cover the state of Texas and Oklahoma. We're one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations in the nation. Our focuses and our work really with policy, building codes, high performance buildings, and then of course supporting local governments. Our membership ranges between advocacy organizations, cities, ESCOs, manufacturers, trade associations, and utilities. And I did want to mention here is that the City Efficiency Leadership Council, cities in the name, but we also include counties, universities, state agencies, and school districts. And with that in the council, it's something that you apply to be a part of. You participate. It's the participation aspect of it. It's not very high. It's like 10 hours a year. And through that, that participation, you get one-on-one training and education. We host regional roundtables. And we have webinar training, such as, and then we also provide technical assistance, and that's portfolio baselining and benchmarking assistance, as well as energy plan development. Also, we have some events coming up, and we also are showcasing some with HARC. And this is, I'll talk about SPEERs, and then Marina, I wanted to give you space to go ahead and talk about what's coming up with HARC as well. Upcoming in September is the Industry Policy Conference that SPEER hosts annually. And this year, we also have a local government specific panel that will be talking about some of these survey results, but from the perspective of having some panelists who are going to showcase and talk about the challenges, but also how they have moved forward and pushed through some of these challenges that we'll be talking later that has been recognized in the survey. And we'll have the University of Texas at Arlington, the City of Houston, and Austin Independent School District. And they're going to be presenting on September 14th, and our time slot is from 1:45 to 2:30. We also have several webinars coming up, and you're welcome to explore our events page, and all of these items are hyperlinked. So Marina, do you want to talk a little bit about your resources and your upcoming events?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Shaun. Welcome, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So yes, we're super excited to be partnering with the Department of Energy on an upcoming webinar on building resilience with combined heat and power later this month on the 30th. And based on the conversations that we're having today about results of local government related to interest and resource needs when it comes to energy efficiency, wanted to highlight a couple of tools that we've developed in partnership with SECO on a platform that we call the Texas Clean Energy Hub, one of which we feel is pretty relevant to the group that is joining us today, which is the Texas Solar Plus Storage Calculator. Basically, this is an online tool that helps you calculate the opportune amount of solar plus storage from a financial as well as a resilience perspective. So definitely encourage you to go to energyhub.harkresearch.org, take a look at the Solar Plus Storage Calculator, as well as the rest of the tools and resources that are on there. So I'll turn it back to you, Shaun. Thanks.
Thanks, Marina. A little bit of housekeeping. Questions are welcome. Please put them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A, where there's those two little comment boxes. And if you have any resources you want to share that come up during our presentation, please share them in the chat as well. The webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the SPEER's YouTube page, as well as we'll be sharing it with HARC. So you'll have two different spaces to explore. And then and the presentation here will be emailed to you and also posted on the SPEER website. We'll also be sending out a survey. I'll be dropping the link in the chat box towards the end of our presentation. Please fill it out. This feedback is very helpful, and also we share that feedback with the State Energy Conservation Office. And then also, I wanted to let you all know that there'll be a one-page summary that will be released in September over the survey overall, because what we've done is really kind of taken a few of the questions and done a deeper dive on them. There was over 25 questions within the survey. So jumping right into it, the methodology for the survey. So we utilized a platform called a Question Pro. It was fantastic. You were able to manipulate the questions and also kind of really have good engagement. And then also, if we wanted to analyze the information further, we'd be able to drop it into SPSS. So it's fantastic. I highly recommend Question Pro as a platform for surveys. We distributed to over 1,700 plus local governments in the state of Texas, and it was through direct email, newsletters. We also utilized the Question Pro platform and Constant Contact, which is also our newsletter engagement platform. And we focused on local governments in the non-attainment region across Texas, as well as universities, school districts, nonprofits, council of governments, cities, counties, and state agencies. I will say that we did not provide any carrots. So the survey was through a person volunteering their time, their 15 minutes. We did not provide any kind of gift certificates or anything for that. And participation in submitting the survey, but you did receive a discount code as a local government to attend our upcoming industry and policy workshop in September. SPEER, we also hosted several regional focus groups for a deeper dive into the survey results and to kind of really talk about, was there some gaps in the questions? How did they perceive the information? And then just also kind of talking about some solutions. So to have an idea about who participated in the survey, I wanted to use a couple of quick slides about that. And the participating agencies, the highest percentage that participated was cities. And then following that was utilities. We also had a smattering of school districts participate. Of course, we would have liked to have stronger participation from universities and counties, as well as college districts. And hopefully maybe next time we roll something out like this, that we will. And then the regions that participated the most was really North Texas. And we have a very strong partnership with the North Central Texas Council and several of the agencies in that region. And then, of course, Central Texas. SPEER is based here in Austin, so it did make sense. We would love to expand and have better relationships with East Texas, of course, West and South and overall. The stakeholders, if you're asking yourself, well, who are the people answering these kind of survey questions? And I will say in local governments, especially when we're talking about large metropolitan cities to smaller rural regions, we have a very wide variety of job titles responding. We even had a judge responding and submitting information to us. And then departments, it didn't always house in the sustainability department or the energy, but through this world cloud, you do see like that it was mostly sustainability departments or administrative or energy. But then if you see a deeper dive, it was actually a broader range of departments that also have these type of responsibilities with energy, sustainability, and resiliency. And the same thing with job titles, you'll see that it's a pretty broad range again for people who are assigned to take on these type of actions and implementation. Again, I had mentioned that we had hosted focus groups. And so we utilized a Mira board for our focus groups and really kind of went through questions of like, what is your priority, and did a deeper dive on that and why are they challenges? And so we could get more of a feedback and understanding and the respondents' answer to those questions. So we had more background details. We also found out through the focus groups that the questions were really made for metropolitan local agencies. So in rural regions, they were unfamiliar with some of the terminology that we had in the questions. And then we also, over and over again in all the focus groups, there was a strong discussion on limited workforce and staffing, just not having enough people or having staff trained to implement these type of programs. And then also came across limitations through leadership understanding and the impact of their work and how why the whys and why should they put this energy and funding into weatherization or resiliency or air quality. So it was pretty interesting and very helpful. So we're going to dive into the findings and overview. So here is the question that we first asked, and that was priorities for local governments. And it was very interesting to see the relationship that the way local governments took the very first question was, what is a priority for them right now at this moment? And as you can see, it was energy equity. And then it was followed by air quality, training, funding, energy efficiency mechanisms, and resiliency. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what do we mean by energy efficiency mechanisms. Energy efficiency mechanisms, there are people who probably are in this call and very familiar, but I did learn through this experience that not everyone was familiar, and so you can't always assume. So it's upgrade strategies and other processes that can be applied to buildings and energy systems to reduce energy consumption, energy costs, and carbon emissions. And there's some examples, but it's retrofit, upgrades, demand response, of course, weatherization, but it also can include internal energy plan or policies. And at this moment, I'm going to ask a poll question. So if y'all just give me one moment so I can release this poll. And it's a text. So I'm going to give you all a moment to respond to that. So I can also see who's all participating. We will go over the poll questions at the end, but I would love to kind of get some responses. So we got one person. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of release this poll question and we'll leave it open until I get to the next section. So y'all can continue and I'll continue on with the presentation. So some other questions that we asked in the survey were, what barriers prevent your organization from moving forward with planning to implementation? And then also, does your organization have any of the following barriers related to energy? looking at this, the highest respondents for barriers to prevent your organization from moving forward with planning to implementation was staffing and technical capacity. And then we look over here, and the largest respondents for does your organization have any of the following barriers related to energy? And it came up as ability to apply and utilize available federal and state incentive funding. We'll have another poll question later to kind of get your feedback on the relationship or synergies you see from that. But it's pretty interesting. So with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the energy efficiency highlights. And by no means did we cover all the energy efficiency questions we included in the survey. But some of the highlights that we saw were the progress is being made on energy planning. 51.43% of the respondents do have energy plans. Of course, we just mentioned implementation barriers, staffing, and technical capacity. And additional resources are needed to move forward with developing and implementing energy plans. Because again, with the progress on energy planning, there's still 50% that are still working on their energy plans or still need one. And then the mention of implementation as a barrier with ability to apply for funds. And it's really interesting, marking the 1 year of the IRA, the ability to apply and utilize federal funding, state incentive is still a challenge. And then also talking about engagement, we didn't cover this, but traditional methods of engagement through in-person events and websites and social media. And then partnerships are sought out, usually are pursued with utilities and K through 12 academics, and moving forward with energy efficiency. And then what we thought was really interesting was of the respondents, the weatherization programs are only implemented by 42%. So that was pretty interesting findings as well. So here we're going to switch over, and Marina, I believe this is where you kind of take over. So I'm going to stop my video and mute myself.
Great, thanks, Shaun. So yeah, a little shift a little bit to focus on one of the topics that we've really been seeing coming to the forefront recently, as agencies, local governments, and companies are looking to align in support of President Biden's executive order to advance racial equity. So as defined on here, a fair and just distribution of the benefits and the costs of an energy system across all members of society really is the foundation of energy equity. And the goal is to ensure that disadvantaged communities have equal access to affordable and clean energy and are not affected by pollution, and that policies, procedures, technologies, and systems are intentionally designed to support this system. And so to make sure that everybody was on the right page with both the focus groups and the survey, we definitely made sure to provide a definition of equity so that everybody was starting from the same starting spot. So if we can go to the next slide, please. One of the tools that we're finding to be pretty neat that is out there is the Energy Justice Dashboard. This is a Department of Energy visualization tool. As you see, it's still in beta stage, that showcases the DOE-specific investments in communities that are experiencing disproportionately high and adverse economic, health, climate-related, environmental, and other cumulative impacts. So the dashboard's really cool because you can go in and it displays Department of Energy cost data, basically the grants, cooperative agreements, and contracts from a variety of program officers from 2019 to present. So from a local government perspective, when you're looking to figure out where to allocate resources, where there might be opportunities to leverage some programs and some funds that are already out there, this is a great tool. And the environmental indicators on here are from another great tool, which is the EPA's EJ Screen tool, which we'll talk about later in this session. Because really what you see through this dashboard is where the low-income communities or communities of color are that are facing the worst air pollution or public health risks at the census tract level. And then it can help identify where daily investments that are made with a Justice 40 focus in clean energy, energy efficiency, clean transportation, workforce development, et cetera, and where we have opportunities also to overlay with that and partner with that development of critical clean water infrastructure. I know our focus today is on energy, but water is an important thing that we always want to be mindful of as well. So on the next slide here, one of the questions, as we mentioned, we started off our engagement with communities and with local governments providing a definition of energy equity, but then also, asking what their definition of energy equity is, to make sure that, within the survey, we were able to dig into not only the energy equity challenges, but also solutions. So, starting with a basic question, asking how the organizations define energy equity. As you can see from the chart on the left, about half the respondents don't have a definition of energy equity. However, from the question on the right, you can see that many organizations are taking steps to achieve an equitable energy system. So, what our hope is here is that there's not a formal definition, but there is, we're inferring that there's an understanding and motivation to move forward to take systems to achieve equity within the energy systems. So if we can go to the next slide, we've got another poll here for you, asking what the priority of integrating energy and equity in your region is. Is it high, medium? Is it low? Is it not a priority? Or is it something that you're just not aware of? I feel like we should have that polling music like they have on Jeopardy or other shows. But again, this is just an opportunity for us to have another data point as we are sharing with you the findings from the surveys and the focus group. So thank you for this. All right, and as Shaun said, we will share the results at the end of the session. So Shaun, if we could go to the next slide, please. And so back to what Shaun was talking about earlier in her slide about some of the highlights, we find it to be really interesting that, engagement from a local government perspective, from an organizational perspective, is still A, very important, and B, what we're seeing is that a lot of the engagement is still being focused on more traditional forms of engagement, from in-person events to a dedicated website and to social media. And what we've seen is that in some areas, these definitely are tried and true methods, but there are definitely opportunities to reach out to some of the underserved populations using some of the more non-traditional methods, and to make sure that as information is being distributed, that it is done so in a way that can meet all, especially the most vulnerable populations. So the next slide is just a quick overview of some of the energy equity highlights that we found. And in the group conversations, we found that many local governments are working to develop energy equity goals. Some of them are doing this as part of their climate, resilience, or sustainability planning initiatives. And that also, while energy equity very often is a grassroots community-driven initiative, really, leadership at all levels need to be engaged when defining the term energy equity, to make sure that you've got buy-in from the top at the start. And then also, when it comes to outreach and engagement, as I mentioned on the last slide, really equity needs to be factored in, as we found that, a lot of the traditional forms of sharing information is, websites was one of the big ones on that last slide. But that doesn't necessarily reach full market penetration, as for some of, especially the more rural areas, internet access isn't widely available. So switching gears a little bit to resilience. This is a term that really has been bandied about quite a bit these days. It's often talked about in relation to chronic issues as well as calamitous events, as the ability to return to normal after an event. However, as we've seen, especially this past summer, what is normal is changing, and we really need to build capacity to avoid damage to and to understand and to prepare for the risks through adaptation and climate mitigation planning. Because really, as we've seen, extreme weather events, they really can and do impact this region. I am based out of the Houston area, so we're accustomed to flooding. We're growing more accustomed to extreme heat challenges, and also we're finding extreme cold is the thing in this region as well. So really collectively, we need to look at both long and short-term challenges, opportunities, and really identify ways to reduce the risk immediately, and then look at the system holistically and identify ways to make improvements in the long term, sometimes 10, 20, 50-year time frame. And on the next slide, you'll see some questions where we had posed to the organizations about resiliency policies and plans, and really finding out the importance of resiliency in these sustainability, resilience, and climate plans. As you can see from the chart on the right, definitely extremes are being taken into account for infrastructure investments. However, we are seeing in some cases that building codes aren't quite there yet. So really, there's a lot of tools and resources and best practices that are out there for adopting and implementing building regulations for resilience. Definitely, I would say check out some of the resources that are available, excuse me, not only through the State Energy Conservation Office, but also Department of Energy, ICC, HUD, and other agencies and organizations have information as well. So if we take a look at the next slide, we've got some resilience highlights. And as we discussed, really, while we are seeing a growing of understanding of resilience at the local governments, and we're starting to see a real push forward in climate resilience and sustainability planning understanding, over half the respondents do not yet have a fully formed resiliency plan in place. And then the code updates are being done to address resiliency planning and hazard mitigation, and that extreme weather risks for infrastructure, as we saw on the last slide, definitely is something of high importance. Another piece that we're finding is that while there are a multitude of funding mechanisms out there, sometimes those can be challenging, and there are hurdles for local governments to overcome when figuring out what the process is and how to apply for some of the more traditional funding mechanisms, such as FEMA and BRIC, as well as some of the new funding mechanisms, such as the IRA, that are coming down the pipeline. So switching gears a little bit to take a look at air quality. As we know, Texas is known for blue skies in our summer days. However, the hot weather that we've been really experiencing recently, combined with pollutants, can make the air unhealthy. So some of us check the TCEQ site for air quality updates, even though the state has passed laws and imposed standards for certain contaminants. But definitely what we're finding is that decreasing carbon emissions through reducing fossil fueled energy consumption is one strong way that we can look to improve air quality across the state. And one of the really neat tools that's out there that I had touched on briefly earlier is the EJ screen. And this is an environmental justice web-based mapping and screening tool that provides a nationally consistent data set and approach for combining environmental and demographic socioeconomic indicators. If we can take a look at the next slide, you'll be able to see how the tool is able to distill information from state level down to the residential block level to create maps and reports. And this is one that just shows across the state of Texas, the PM 2.5. And so really this is a tool that can be used as an initial screening in addition to the one that we showed earlier for states to really create maps and reports and use this to help inform community outreach and engagement practices. So really, it's a great tool for local governments to use, also to prioritize places to take a closer look for some environmental justice impacts, as well as opportunities. So we took this and really distilled it down with a few questions to participants. And on the next slide, be able to see kind of an overview of respondents' feedback of the state of air quality in the region. So on the chart on the left, a majority of respondents are in non-attainment areas. Many of those are in the regions around the large metropolitan and industrial areas of the state, which aligns with, as Shaun pointed out earlier, the respondents to the survey. And then the chart on the right focuses on the well-to-wheels emissions from fossil fuel powered vehicles. And as we can see, organizations are really starting to undertake measures to shift to alternative fueled forms of transportation. And on the next slide, we'll dig into that a little bit more as we look at the potential for conversion. Large chunk of it, not surprising. On the left, you'll see electric vehicle is the conversion that is being explored the most. And many of the local governments are mapping out frameworks for achieving this action to convert to electric vehicles. And a lot of it is being defined through the frameworks in their climate resilience sustainability plans. And so really we're seeing actions to solidify this. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this again is a highlight of what we saw in the air quality measures, which is, non-attainment or near non-attainment still, unfortunately, is a big issue that Texas continues to grapple with. Fleet management and looking at expanding opportunities to continue to employ and expand alternative vehicles in local government fleets. And then the conversion to EV, it's not at critical mass yet, but definitely we are seeing some strides moving forward on that. And for those local governments looking at a conversion to alternative fueled vehicles, electric vehicles definitely is the prime there. And so with that, Shaun, did you want me to turn it back to you for the funding section?
Sure, I'll be happy to cover the funding. So I'm not going to read through all these, but I did want to kind of set the tone that for local governments, there's several different opportunities to receive funding mechanisms to move forward resiliency, sustainability, air quality initiatives, and energy efficiency. And those are through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law. And then there's also some mechanisms specifically to Texas, the Lone Star revolving loan program through the State Energy Conservation Office. We also have other mechanisms, and that's the energy savings performance contracting, and then green funds, and then as well as, also that was a benefit through the Inflation Reduction Act is the utility rebates and incentives. So partnering with utilities, which we saw previously in our survey, is a very strong thing to do on utilizing the energy efficiency incentive programs through utilities or demand response options. So in this section of looking at funding, we had asked some, just basic questions about understanding what funding focuses our organizations kind of spending their energy and investing in. And the highest was energy efficiency mechanisms. So local governments are investing in energy efficiency mechanisms, and that's fantastic to hear. And understanding too, like where, when we put this into priorities, also the investments aren't really mirroring what, such as the question that we had asked in the beginning of what is their priority right now. And so seeing that is that energy equity and as well as, electrification infrastructure a little bit lower and investments for prioritized investments right now. And then also, have you applied for federal funding to support resiliency initiatives? We really wanted to look at that and found that it was 28% of the respondents had applied for FEMA. 46.88% has stated no, but interested. And I think that that really aligns with the question on what are some of the challenges or barriers for utilizing funds, and that's the ability to apply because of staffing issues. So again, I mentioned that, but here in our funding highlights that there's a strong focus in energy efficiency mechanisms for funding priorities at organizations, and then staffing time and skills to apply for funding opportunities are barriers. And then again, marking the 1 year of the IRA, the ability to apply and utilize federal and state funding, incentive funding is still a challenge. So we're going to go ahead and shift over to something that was very apropos, and then we put this, there were several questions focusing on training and local government staff. And I had come across this article, the conversation, it was part of that green jobs are booming, but too few employees have sustainability skills to fill them. And it talks about 4 ways to close the gap, but from that article, they talked about how there's a growing demand for urban sustainability officers who can help transition cities to be net zero carbon and more resilient. And the world's adding 1 million people to cities every 5 days and building 20,000 American football fields worth of urban areas. And this article came out, I think a month ago. So 20,000 American football fields worth of urban areas someplace on the planet every day. So we do need staffing to support this huge change. And then also not just in the public, we also need it in the private industry. The number of companies with chief sustainability officers in executive positions also tripled from 9% to 28% between 2016 and 2021. But given the scale and business opportunities of sustainability, the skills are still are needed much more widely within organizations. And I can drop the link to that article if you would like to explore that more later in the presentation. But now, kind of after setting that tone, we look at this question that we asked: what additional training do you feel staff needs at your organization? And the highest response was really having an understanding of energy codes, as well as federal rules, state rules, and energy management. And then as well as just having understanding of climate-specific tools and a typical adaptation knowledge and climate science. And this question, I will say that the respondents, they could check all that were apply. And so we found that very interesting. And then we kind of pivot over here to some of the tools that SPEER offers and examining that and looking at the aspect. There's one question that you all don't see is presented, is asked about what's the form of training that was online training, in person, or conferences. It was 100% that the respondents wanted their staff to receive online training. And so that really mirrors too with some of those resources that SPEER provides. And that's, with our CELC webinars at 60%, that a lot of local governments utilize these type of webinars and educational opportunities for professional development. And then we also have a code training program that's utilized pretty well, and then SPEER policy resources that you can find on our website. So these are a lot of resources that are also supported by the State Energy Conservation Office and the Department of Energy. So it's fantastic to kind of see this mirror, and the demand is moving forward really to have these have accessibility to these type of resources for professional development. Also wanted to mention here is there's a great tool that the Houston Advanced Research Center has developed, and it's an interactive tool. So you can also gain that professional development by utilizing these tools, and it's on their website. It's the Texas Clean Energy Hub. And it was put together pretty recently. Marina, do you want to speak on this a little bit before we move forward?
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. So Texas Clean Energy Hub, as we discussed earlier, is really, a platform that pulls in a variety of different tools and resources to help you on your clean energy and energy efficiency journey. So we've created some interactive tools like the solar plus storage calculator, the emissions calculator, the energy savings financing tool. We've also compiled a lot of webinars and have developed podcasts that really focus in, excuse me, on this topic, and then have assembled a variety of case studies from different market verticals, as well as how-to guides to help you on your process, help you to engage and implement clean energy as well as energy efficiency strategies. Shaun?
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that that I did not leave anything out, so I appreciate that, Marina. So kind of closing this gap of looking at training, some of the highlights were the overall staffing knowledge for this industry is being pushed to have in-depth technical training. And then training needs to be flexible to provide and be provided online to for everyone's schedules, and then also just for funding aspects that local governments cannot always send their staff to conferences and also in-person training events just because of accessibility for overnight stays and travel. Local governments will also need further resources to attract qualified staffing or additional technical training resources because they are in competition with the growing need in the private industry. So with that, here are some of our conclusions. And so overall, the statewide survey, it's just a starting point for a better understanding of local government's needs and interests. We did see that if we're going to move forward with this, we also do need to be mindful of rural regions and really kind of close that gap in some of these questions to address their needs and interests as well. And local governments, they're updating codes to address resiliency planning and hazard mitigation, but there's a lot of space for more work. Marketing the 1 year of the IRA, the ability to apply and utilize federal and state incentive funding is still a challenge for local governments, and most likely will continue to be if we don't see a change in having enough staff and grant writers available for them. There's a strong focus on energy efficiency mechanisms for funding priorities at organizations, and we need to continue to provide that support for them and providing knowledge and what kind of mechanisms are out there as technology moves forward. And overall, staffing knowledge for this industry, again, it's being pushed. And it's really hard for a staff person to have all that in-depth technical training. So it's either going to have a very well-versed staff, or you're going to have to also make sure that you have enough funding to hire, have more than one person in your team to have that knowledge base. And then local governments are utilizing several mechanisms in fleet management, with expanding alternative fuels being the most utilized, and as what we're talking about is electrification. So here we're going to go into the poll recap, and I will share the results. And if you wouldn't mind, we'll also, let me see, poll questions. So we're sharing the results right now. And what are your organization's barriers to energy efficiency implementation? And it was administrative, rented space. If a person could kind of expand on that a little bit more, that'd be great. And then funding, multifamily housing has issues with split incentive where we want to complete projects, but we won't see the savings. Legislation, budget and staff knowledge, and then some stated not aware of anything in the moment, they'll need to check, and then also their requirement for energy compliance, and again, funding. So that's some really good data points and feedback. Marina, is there anything you wanted to make a statement to that before I go to the other survey results?
No, I think we've covered this nicely.
And then with equity, you have here is that 62% stated, you know, it was the priority of integrating energy and equity in your region. 62% stated high, then 23% said medium, and then 15% unknown. So that does really mirror what we received across the board in the statewide survey as well. So I'm going to stop sharing and make space for questions. And also stop sharing my screen so we can kind of open this up. Eddy, did you have any remarks as well? Oh, we're welcome to kind
No,
of
I'm in listening mode here. I'm
You're in
curious
listening
to
mode.
see. Yes, thank you.
And Marina, did you have any remarks? We don't have any questions coming in, so.
Yes, Shaun, thank you. I just wanted to say that, I'm thrilled that we were able to work to get this survey out. Super excited with the engagement that we've received, because I feel that this positions us nicely to do some additional research in the coming months and year. So for all of you who participated, thank you very much.
And I concur. Thank you so much for those of you who participated and took time of your day. I know that it is being pulled in lots of different directions, as you could tell from the different job titles and roles. And so we're so glad you could join us. And I want to say again to share and give thanks to our partners, the State Energy Conservation Office and the Houston Advanced Research Center, and being able to move this forward. So we appreciate you all. And I also am so glad that people utilize this opportunity to say their voices, use their voices in local governments. And I think that there will definitely be seeing some great programming moving forward and utilizing this information. So with that, we'll close, and thanks again. And you'll be able to peruse this on our YouTube channel in probably about like 24 hours. So you can look for it then. Thanks again.